Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today it's going to be the update to the Magicka Templar build known as Off Balance for the Stonethorn DLC. Now of course this is designed to supply as much off balance as possible to your group at the same time as supplying a decent amount of single target while having very good AoE at the same time. This can also help your group sustain and survive just by doing your rotation. It's completely static, you never have to change it at all. So if you want to see some more of this, stay tuned, it's all going to be explained.
How did you do that? How did you do that?
So first of all, we're going to go into the stats, of course, as per usual. Check our potion, make sure everything's running. Lovely. Okay, so we are on 39.5k max Magicka, 18k max health, which is pretty good. 10k max stamina, and our recovery for Magicka is 812 at the moment. We're on 66% crit and almost 3k spell damage. Do not worry, that will go up quite considerably with different options and of course our glyph that we're using on our weapon. We have 22k spell resistance and, we just lost that, let's put it back on, 17.5k physical resistance. So our survival is actually very, very good just for our base stats, both our resistances and our health combined. But we'll go more into that once we get to the skills, because of course our skills do have heals in them as well. 64 points into max Magicka. We are using max health, max Magicka food, and the Thief Mundustone, not the Shadow. On this particular build, the Shadow did turn out to be a lot less most of the time. Now the food we're using is this, it's max health, max Magicka, 5.3k max health, almost 5.4, and almost 5k max Magicka as well. It's flat food, no recovery whatsoever. If you want to use recovery food, of course, you can choose to do so, but our sets already have massive amounts of recovery in it, so we don't really need to. Again, that is a choice you can alter if you prefer. Now we're going to go into the skills. I'm going to explain where these all come from, of course, and why you want to use them. First of all is Purifying Light. This is in the Dawn's Wrath skill line. Third ability you unlock starts off as Backlash, morph it to Purifying Light. This lands on the target and lasts for 6 seconds. Initially, it does magic damage on the first hit. Then over that 6-second period, it will actually count up how much damage you've done to that target and release 20% of it in a pop at the end. However, this is capped at the amount you can see now, 23,728, but that can go up with buffs and bonuses, not by much, but just bear in mind this can crit, so that can be a lot higher. And when it's finished, this will heal in area of effect around the target after it's popped, once every 2 seconds to all members of your group, yourself included. So this is a very nice count up damage then pop ability, so direct damage as well, and area of effect heal combined. It's a very fast durated ability. We are going to use it once every rotation. Now next up is Barbed Trap. This is in the Fighters Guild skill line. Last ability to unlock starts off as Trap Beast, morph to Barbed Trap. This is a stamina ability, yes, and it does immobilize a target, unless it's a boss, in which case it can't immobilize it. But for activating this, you will actually do physical damage over time to the target, which is not that important because our physical is not that high. But what we do gain from this during that duration is minor force. Basically, all of our crit damage that we do, and we will crit a lot, is increased by 10%. Now, this is very important to keep up in our rotation 100% of the time, and our rotation allows us to do so. We will overlap it. This will never run out as long as you pay attention. Now, next, of course, is Radiant Oppression. This can be changed to the other morph if you prefer. This is in the Dawn's Wrath skill line. Last ability to unlock starts off as Radiant Destruction. Morph it to Radiant Oppression. This is our main execute ability. Now listen to this very carefully. It does last 1.8 seconds. It's a channel. And it does magic damage. But it deals up to an additional 480% extra damage the lower the target's health. Starting from 50%, it will get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger the lower the target's health. Now just bear in mind, of course, that 50% is kind of where it starts. That's not where it peaks. It peaks at lower. So on bosses, you want to start using this around 30%. On ad pulls, you want to start using it on ads about 40%. Anything higher than that is just, honestly, underkill. You actually get less out of it than you would your main spammable. So bear in mind, this is going to require you paying attention to the target's health. But we'll go over that more when we get to the rotation. Now, choices. This does deal up to 20% more damage based on the proportion of Magicka left in your bar. So, if you have 10%, you'll do a very low amount of damage. In fact, you'll probably do no extra at all, or barely any extra. If you have a full bar, you'll do much more. So, the more sustain you have, the stronger this gets. If you're very, very low, then you don't get really anything at all, and you may as well use the other morph. Which, by the way, is insane for your survival. The other morph is called Radiant Glory. Now, this doesn't have additional damage if you have excess Magicka in your bar, so the higher percentage you have does make a difference, but it will heal you for 20% of all the damage done. So every single tick of damage this does, you will heal from each tick. Healing during an execute while channeling is insane. So if you don't have very high recovery most of the time, or you find that you're just having to do too much work and you're always low Magicka for whatever reason, the other morph is going to be more beneficial for you, because at least you're going to stay alive. Damage-wise, if your Magicka is really low a lot of the time, then you're not going to see any difference between the two anyway. So you might as well take the heal. I would recommend Glory, but if you want a little bit of extra damage, if you can keep on top of your rotation sustain, then of course Oppression is up to you. Now, next is Puncturing Sweeps. This is our main spam ball. This is in the Adric Spear skill line. It's really hard to say fast. First ability you unlock starts off as Puncturing Strikes, morph it to Puncturing Sweeps. That was difficult to say too. Now, this lasts 1 second. It is a channeled ability. If you try to cancel it or bar swap it or block it or anything like that, it will just stop. But while it's channeling, it will do damage. It will hit 4 times. The target closest to you, the one in front, will take the most damage, and all surrounding targets in front of you will also take damage, just less. So this is an area of effect ability. It does direct damage, yes, but it's not direct single target. It's direct area of effect. Now, this will also snare enemies, which is not that important, but it can help if a tank's trying to control stuff. But above all the damage you do with this ability, you actually heal for 40% of the damage done. So the more enemies you have to hit, the more heals you get back. Keep this up in your rotation. It's incredibly important, not just for single target, but for AoE as well, and your survival. This is why we're kind of pushing for as much AoE as we can, because we can hit so many things and just not die. Now, Inner Light is next. This doesn't actually have to be activated. This is in the Mage's Guild skill line. Very simple. First ability to unlock starts off as Mage Light, morph it to Inner Light. You only need Mage's Guild 2 to get this, and this will give you Major Prophecy all the time on your front bar, increasing your crit chance by 10%, which is nice. And this will give you max Magicka of an additional 5% while it's on your bar as well. The actual activation of this is to unstealth invisible enemies, which we don't need to do anyway because we're not in PvP. This is a PvE build. So never press the button and you'll always have that flat passive bonus on this bar. Next up is our main ultimate on the front bar, purely for stats. If you don't have Mage's Guild 10, you won't have access to this. Do not worry, you can use Nova instead, which we'll go over in a second. But if you do have Mage's Guild 10, you can put Shooting Star on your bar. This is here just for passives, which we'll go over later. But every enemy that you hit with this would give you 12 ultimate back. So if you hit a cluster of 10 enemies, that's 120 ultimate back. You can borderline spam this in massive ad pulls, but in short, it's a meteor that comes out of the sky and does damage initially and then leaves a damage over time on the ground for 13 seconds. It's pretty good, but we're not going to be using this as our main ultimate all the time. This is just here for stats unless the situation permits it. So if the target's almost dead and you don't have enough ultimate for the back bar one, then of course fire it. Failing that, you probably want to save up your back bar one because it's really, really strong. Again, if you don't have that or you don't have access to it yet, you can of course get Nova and morph it to Solar Prison. This will actually help your group as well as doing damage in area of effect. If anyone takes a synergy, it does massive damage to all enemies close by and stuns them or knocks them down. It does damage over time from you in area effect, and anyone caught inside of this, enemies, will be affected with Major Maim, reducing all the damage they do by 30%. So this is a major damage reduction ability, but you must hit the target with it. It's not for your friends inside of it, it's for the enemies inside of it. So those are your two choices. You can have Solar Prism or you can have Shooting Star. Up to you. Now, back bar. This is in the Light Armor skill line. This is originally Annulment, morph it to Harness Magicka. This is basically your damage shield. Now, this is scaled off of your max Magicka, so the more magic the better, but it is capped at your max health, at 50% of your max health. So the higher your health bar, the higher the threshold for that cap. But, of course, your Magicka bar does consider how far it can actually go. The health bar decides where it stops. That confusing bit out of the way, it's a damage shield. If you're in trouble, activate this, you have a 9k damage shield. If you've got more health, it'll be stronger. This also can absorb damage, of course in the form of its own traditional usage, but for doing so, if it's a magic ability, you will actually restore magic as well. So this can be increased based on how many light pieces you're wearing, and it can happen 3 times throughout the ability's duration, unless it gets stripped straight away. So activate it when you're in trouble, or if you don't want to use this, if you feel like you are absolutely fine, you're not too squishy, your group is keeping you up, you're absolutely fine, you can swap this for Inner Light and just double bar it for the bonuses on both bars. Again, your choice. Now, Unstable Wall of Elements is next. This is in the Destruction Staff skill line. Just bear in mind, of course, this does change based on the element of the weapon you are using. So, this is called Unstable Wall of Storms because we're using a Lightning Staff. The reason for this, of course, is because it does shock damage, and if your shock damage ends up applying concussion, which is a chance via status effect, because it's lightning, you can, of course, set the enemies off balance while being inside this wall of elements. Any other elemental type cannot do this. So we are obviously called off balance. We're trying to force that, and this actually does help push that. It does damage over time on the ground to all enemies caught inside of it. Each one can be concussed, and each one concussed inside will go off balance. Now, if you're not familiar with off balance, while a target is off balance, your heavy attacks will do 70% more damage. You will gain back double resources, and if you have 75 points in the last blue champion point tree, regardless of your build, you will, of course, get the Exploiter passive, increasing all of your damage done by 10%. So this is a group buff. Now, if you were to use Fire, then that would be very different. Fire would increase the damage of the ticks if they have a burn and status effect on them, but you can't knock stuff off balance. So the choice is actually yours as to which one you use, but if you want it for the main purpose of the build, i.e. supplying off balance, use Lightning. If off balance is definitely already controlled in your group, and you can guarantee that somebody else can control this without you needing to do this, because it's very, very simple for us anyway, then of course you can go with the flame stuff on the back bar, and that will give you a stronger wall of elements. But that is very situational. If you're there to supply off balance, use a lightning staff. If you're not, use a flame staff. Choices. Anyway. Solar Barrage is next. This is in our Dawn's Wrath ability skill line as well. Second one you unlock starts off as Solar Flare, morph it to Solar Barrage. This cannot be any simpler. It lasts for 10 seconds, you activate it, and it does damage in an area of effect around you, so it follows you, once every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. While it is active, any light attack you do will be increased by 40%. So you're granted in power, basically. Keep this up, all your light attacks are stronger. Channeled Focus is next. This is in our Restoring Light skill line. Last ability you unlock starts off as Rune Focus, morph it to Channeled Focus. Now this does give us Major Resolve, increasing our physical and spell resistance by 5280 for 20 seconds. But you also recover Magicka once a second, gaining 240 every single second that you stand inside of this. So that's effectively 480 recovery on top of what you already have, because recovery is calculated every 2 seconds. Which is a bit stupid, considering we're already 800. Now, this also increases the strength of Major Resolve. This is the only buff of its kind in the game. Major Resolve is a major resistance buff. Everybody can have it, whether it be class skills, group skills, whatever. There is always a way to find it, but this particular version of it is boosted by 50%. You can't get that anywhere else. You can only get it on the Templar from this skill. So if you do need to use this skill, if you do need the resistances, you will have stronger Major Resolve than anybody else. So just bear in mind, if you're standing in it, it is stronger. Next up is Blazing Spear. This is in the Adric Spear skill line. Fourth ability to unlock starts off as Spear Shards. Again, much like Wall of Elements, keep this on the ground at all times. This will do magic damage initially when it lands, and then it will do magic damage every 1 second for 10 seconds. Now, this also puts a spear on the ground so that other people can pick it up and gain back Magicka or Stamina, whichever of the two is higher. Now, if you prefer, you can, of course, change this to Relentless Focus, which is in the Dawn's Wrath skill line. And now, if you prefer, you can, of course, go into Restore and Light and change this to Ritual of Retribution, which starts off as Cleansing Ritual, if you want a larger area of effect damage over time, which gets progressively stronger and with a healing synergy. But for the purpose of the Adric Spear passives, I do preference having this particular skill on here instead. You could, of course, put it on here if you preferred, if you like this skill, but you don't have to. Set up as we are, this is what we're using, but if you want to swap anything out, there will be alterations to your results, but you can, of course, still do very well with them. Now, finally, Thunderous Rage. Again, this is dependent on the element of your staff. So it'll start off as Elemental Storm, morph it to Elemental Rage. It's called Thunderous Rage because it's lightning. It will have a different name if it's fire or ice. It's basically a massive thunderstorm, and all enemies caught inside of this will take damage every 1 second for 9 seconds for us. And it's shock damage, meaning every single one of them could be concussed inside your Wall of Elements, forcing them off balance. So more lightning for our build. The more lightning, the better at the moment. Now, if you do change to Flame on the back bar, you won't have the off-balance opportunities, you won't be able to force it, you won't have concussion from those abilities, but you will of course, end up with a different version of it. The different version meaning the damage will be 15% higher. Just bear in mind, of course, while that damage is 15% higher, you don't gain the extra 2 seconds. So that can sometimes balance out. Depends whether you want the extra burst or not. And it also depends whether you have a Dragon Knight in your group or not, boosting your fire damage. Again, that's a choice, entirely up to you, but if you want to keep things simple, off balance is the purpose of the build, so keep it lightning if you can. Now, I'm going to go into passives real quick. I'm going to explain these quite brief if I can, but these are important. You do need to pay attention to them. This increases your critical damage by 10% for having an Adric Spear ability slotted. Just bear in mind, of course, we have Puncture and Sweeps on the front bar, so we do have this bonus here, and we have Blazing Spear on the back bar. Note, this must have an ability on your bar from this skill line to work. We do have that. If you take off any of these skills, you take off this or you take off this, you lose it. So there goes your crit damage. This will give you minor protection, reduce the amount of damage you take by 8% just for activating an Adric Spear ability, and it will last for 6 seconds. So if you activate Puncture and Sweeps, 6 seconds worth. Activate this, 6 seconds worth. Inside our rotation, except for Execute, we can actually have this up 100% of the time, making us quite tanky, especially alongside of our resistances. When you deal damage with an Adric Spear ability 4 times in rapid succession, you will deal 1,850 physical damage or 5,308 Magicka damage. Now this depends on your damage type. For us, we're built for magic, so it will do magic damage. If you are built for stamina, it will do physical damage instead. So obviously the higher one of the two is what we're going to get for us based on our setup. And this can happen every time you have 4 rapid hits with an Adric Spear ability. So whether it's a dot from this or jab, 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 jab from this, whichever, when you clock up 4, this can fire. So it's free damage. It counts as direct damage as well. So it's a very, very helpful passive. It does a stupid amount of damage. If you're using combat metrics, it's quite obvious. Look for Burning Light. You'll see. Now, this increases your weapon damage, which is not that important for us, but it does increase our spell resistance, so we will take that. Higher spell resistance is quite nice, especially since a lot of damage in PvE is actually magic damage. This increases the duration of some of our abilities in this skill line, including Nova, which is our main ultimate. If we do decide to use it from this skill line, our Solar Barrage as well does get increased, which is quite helpful, so we do want to get this. This is very important for your ultimate regen if you activate a Dawn's Wrath ability, and we will do every bar, and especially at Execute. If you do that once every 6 seconds, you will gain 3 ultimate for the privilege. Faster than 6 seconds, you won't, but after every 6 seconds, if you do fire one of them, there's some free ultimate. Nice. Custom Dawn's Wrath ability gives you minor sorcery, increasing your group's spell damage by 10% for 20 seconds. Now, at the beginning, you saw me with just short of 3k. I actually have over 3k with this passive bonus once we've activated a skill from that skill line. And, of course, we've got glyphs on our armor, or weapon even, so that will go even higher. This reduces the cost of any health, magic, stamina, or ultimate ability by 5%. So all of our abilities are cheaper flat out. Now, if you're not using any of these abilities, apart from, of course, Channel Focus, then some of these aren't going to be useful. This is no good for us unless we use an ability that has a heal on it. At the moment, we're not, unless you use Ritual of Retribution for the synergy, but that is for other people, not necessarily for you. While standing in your Cleansing Ritual, Rune Focus, which is your Channel Focus here, or Rite of Passage, and after 4 seconds of leaving them, you will gain minor mending, increasing your healing done. So while standing inside of our rune, we actually get bigger heals from ourselves. So Puncture and Sweeps, for example, jab, 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 heal, 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 it's stronger. If we leave the circle or it fades away, it continues for a further 4 seconds before it disappears. Also, it increases the amount of damage you can block for the duration as well, so very helpful. Whenever you heal an ally under 50% health with a Restoring Light ability, you grant them 2 ultimate. Now, that's not actually helpful for us unless someone takes a synergy from Ritual of Retribution. Again, we're not actually using that for the most part unless you choose to, so you can dump this if you want. This one you do want to keep, though. Increases your resurrection speed by 20%, and resurrected allies return with 100% more health. Not to mention, of course, you can fill an empty soul gem. So you use a soul gem and fill one up at the same time. It didn't cost you anything. We are the fastest people that can res in the game. Fastest class at resin in the game for free. We're not including the Necromancer ulti because that costs. But just a flat out standard res, we're very, very quick. So if you see someone die, get them up fast. Don't try and rely on everybody else to do it. You're the one with this passive bonus to do so. Destruction Staff, of course, this is very important. Try Focus. If you heavy attack with a Shock Staff, you will do splash damage. Bear in mind, it doesn't consider the crit. The crit is how much you will do on single target. The amount of stacked up flat damage you do underneath that crit is the damage you will do in area of effect. So in a big cluster of adds, Wall of Elements down, massive heavy attack, everything gets splashed to death. Really, really fun passive. Make sure you get this as soon as possible. It is very important, especially during off balance, because your flat goes up by 70%. This will increase your ability to go through resistances with Destruction Staff ability. So Wall of Elements, heavy attack, light attack with your Destro Staff will ignore 10% of the enemy's spell resistance. This increases your chance to apply Burning, Concussed, and Chilled status effects if you hold a Destruction Staff. So if you have a different weapon on, you don't keep this passive unless you're on that particular bar. But we do have 2 Destro staves. Doesn't matter what flavor they are, we have 2. So on both bars, we will always have a heightened chance to apply Burning, Concussed, or Chilled based on the element type of damage we're doing. We are trying to push as much lightning as possible so we can gain as much concussion as possible to then force enemies off balance inside Wall of Elements. Concussion is the leading point to knock off balance targets. However, just bear in mind, concussion does have a side effect. Concussion's side effect is minor vulnerability. The more of this we can apply, the longer minor vulnerability is up for free. Minor vulnerability increases all the damage you do to the target by 8%. It's a massive buff, and we can keep it up very, very often with our setup if you're taking the lightning variant of it. Equipping the lightning staff increases your damage done. Listen to this very carefully because people get this wrong. Damage done with area of effect abilities. People seem to think that this increases your area of effect damage if there are multiple targets. 100% false. This increases the damage of AoE skills. This is AoE. So is this. So is this. So is this. Now, why is that important? Not to mention our main spammable, of course, is area of effect, so that will make us do more damage with that skill on our front bar. The Wall of Elements, even if it is a flame staff, when you get onto your front bar, holding a lightning staff will make it stronger. So, while the flame version of this may be higher if you have burning status effect, once you get onto the front bar, that bonus still applies, but you are now considered to be on your AoE bar, so that AoE skill is stronger. That is very important to understand. Lots of people misunderstand that. They think flame is stronger flat out. Flame damage is its own element type. It does have its own rules, but so does lightning. And combined, they can actually benefit each other. You don't have to go double flame and think, oh, that's going to be a stronger Wall of Elements. It's actually not. Flame on the back, Wall of Elements, with a flame staff on the front, doesn't increase the AoE damage of it. It doesn't increase the damage versus single target. It only increases the damage versus single target skills. Wall of Elements is not one of those. So if you do choose to use a flame on the back for the higher Wall of Elements, when you swap to the front, it will be stronger because of this weapon choice. If you do choose to use a lightning staff, well then it's win-win because it's just stronger than it should be flat out all the time anyway. You can't really lose with it, but pay attention to these passives. They're incredibly important. When you kill an enemy with a Destruction Staff ability, you can restore 3600 Magicka if you're holding a Destruction Staff. That means if you light attack, heavy attack, or kill something in Wall of Elements, you get free magic back. Fantastic. We are using 3 types of armor, but you want to get all of the light armor passives and a couple of these. Well, in fact, 3 of each. So every single one of these is important. This will increase your effectiveness versus snares. So if you get snared, you're very slow. This will actually make you faster, even though you still slow down, per piece worn. This will also reduce the cost of sprinting per piece. This will increase your magic recovery per piece and also the reduction to cost for Magicka skills. This will increase your spell resistance per piece. This requires 5 pieces and increases your spell crit rating by 10%. And this, when you actually have 5 pieces, your spell penetration is increased by 4,884. So that's absolutely incredible. Medium, you only need 3 of these. You won't really need this, so dump that one. Windwalker's quite nice. This increases your stam recovery, which we'll need for blocks, dodge rolls, and all that good stuff, and reduces the cost of stamina abilities. We are using 1 stamina ability. We'll take the 2% reduction. Sneak is meh. If you want it, take it. If you don't, don't. Agility is useless because we don't have 5 pieces, but you might want athletics because it increases your sprint speed, and of course reduces the cost of dodge roll, which is actually very, very nice because we are going to need to evade. So above all, you're going to want to have at least Windwalker and athletics, but improved sneak is entirely up to you. Heavy armor, you want the first 3, not these because they require 5. This will increase your health by 2% per piece worn, where you have 1. This will increase your health recovery, and if you take damage, you will actually get 108 Magicka and stamina back once every 4 seconds. So as long as you're getting hit, which most of the time you will be. And this increases your physical and spell resistance per piece worn as well. These are minor bonuses, but they do add up, so do get them if you've got the spare points. Fighter's Guild, we will want a couple of these passives. You will want Intimidating Presence to get the cost of Beast Trap down by 15%, and you will also want to get Banish the Wicked. you will actually get 9 ultimate back if you kill undead, daedra, or werewolf enemies. And based on the fact that we've got a stupid amount of area of effect, and we can supply off balance so it can increase our damage even more, we will kill a lot of things in area of effect. So we can build our ultimate very, very quickly. Not to mention, of course, if you are using Shooting Star and big ad pulls and you don't have enough for the back bar ulti, you can just repeatedly gain ultimate by smashing loads and loads of targets at once and killing them, if they are of this enemy type. Undaunted, of course, is very important. Every single synergy you take will give you 4% of all 3 resources back. Don't be a donut and leave the synergies on the floor. Take them. They'll give you a heal, they'll give you damage output, they'll give you a shield, they'll give you something beneficial regardless. And for doing so, you get your juice back. 10 synergies, 40% resources back. Don't complain about your sustain if you're not taking synergies. It's your own fault. This is how you recover if you've got those opportunities in front of you. This also increases your max health, max stam, and max Magicka by 2% per type of armor worn. So there's 3 different types of armor in the game, light, heavy, and medium. We're actually using all 3 types, so we get the full bonus to all 3 resources. Mage Guild I almost skipped. We don't necessarily need the passives in here apart from one of them, which is of course this. This increases your Magicka and recovery by 2% for each Mage's Guild ability slotted. This is why I said this ultimate is here for passives mostly, because being here within a light, although this gives us a 5% bonus already, because they are both abilities from this skill line, each one gives us 2%. You will need to go quite high into Mage's Guild to unlock this. If you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. But if you do get there, of course you might want to get this. High Elf is the race. When you activate a class ability, you restore 640 Magicka or stamina based on whichever is the lowest. For us, our lowest is our stamina. So we cast Beast Trap with stamina. We use a class ability which costs Magicka, and we gain stamina back once every 6 seconds. So borderline twice every rotation if we're lucky. That will give us back over 1,200 stamina, which alongside our stam recovery of about, 600 or so, this becomes not far off of almost free. It's very easy to sustain this, especially inside mechanics where you have perhaps your group giving you stamina back. Maybe they've got some synergy effects, maybe they've got some resource recovery abilities. Whatever's going on inside your rotation, as long as you're not dodge rolling too much and you're not blocking or bashing too much over the top or sprinting too much, you can sustain this all day long. Also, any channeled ability you use will give you 5% less damage intake while it is channeling. Puncture and Sweeps is channeling all the time. Jab, 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 jab. We are protected with this passive, and of course we have minor protection for doing so from the Adric Spear passive, and we are in a resistance circle if you use it, and we're basically very, very tanky. This increases your max magic by 2k, and this increases your spell damage by 258. You can choose any race you like, but I've just clearly gone over the reasons for this one. Other races will have different passives. It's totally fine to use them, but you might have to jiggle your stats a little bit just to make it a bit more comfortable for you based on what you are missing out on, or perhaps what you're gaining. Alchemy, of course, medicinal use is one of the most important skills in the game, in my opinion, as far as passives are concerned. If you have this at level 3, you can then make your potions last longer. The cooldown is 45 seconds. This will make them last 47. So you have infinite uptime on your potions. When I say infinite uptime, I don't mean that as just a kind of, oh, you could if you want to. No, they are consumable buffs. Do not let them run out. As soon as that potion is off grey, press it again. Make sure you keep them up all the time. We are using spell pots, which will give us crit, sorcery, and magic recovery. So we want to make sure we have that all day long. Now we're going to go into the gear. So if you've used this before, you will not be disappointed. You'll be surprised, but you won't be disappointed because you can still use the stuff you've always used. And we're going to go over that version of the build first. And then I'm going to tell you what you can do to optimize it if you already have really good recovery, you do harder content, or you just want to have a little bit more damage. Now, when I say do harder content, I mean for access of the loot. I don't mean this needs to be upgraded in order to do harder content. This can do everything the game throws at it as it is now. But again, I'm going to go over some choices. So, the easier option, of course, is Overwhelming. This you can get in normal Tempest Island. This particular light and staff has a named version that comes from the last boss. So if you just farm the dungeon over and over, you could get her to drop her specific weapon, which means you don't have to have RNG on all the different versions of this set weapon you could get. You can just get it from her. Now, this has Magicka, spell damage, and when you deal damage with a class ability, you surround yourself with shock, basically, and zap, 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 zap up to 6 targets at once every 1 second for 6 seconds, with a 1 second cooldown after it is finished, and then it can reapply again. And 15% of the damage you deal will be returned to you in Magicka. So if you are standing up against 6 targets and you're jabbing the hell out of them, you basically can't run out of Magicka. And you're shocking them, which alongside your wall of elements, so your lightning wall of elements, will actually push for more concussion, allowing you to easily supply off balance. You can borderline control it all day long. So that is a very, very nice set to have. It helps if you actually have it on the jewelry and the weapon, because the weapon can be acquired via the last boss, although you can get it from trash chests and all that kind of stuff if you just get the basic one. And the jewelry, there are actually some named jewelry pieces in that dungeon as well, so that makes the jewelry a lot easier to farm too. Now, as far as traits are concerned, you want to make sure that you have Infused on one and Bloodthirsty on the other. Bear in mind, Bloodthirsty was changed. It will increase the damage you do against the target based on the percentage of their health, starting from 90% and lower. So the lower their health, the more spell damage against that target you will have. This won't show in your stats because it's subjective to the particular target itself. However, since it is a spell damage increase, this doesn't affect procs. So before, where the damage you do will be X amount stronger at low health, now it's your spell damage versus the target is different. So while all your skills will get stronger, your procs will not. So just bear that in mind. But 1 infused, 2 bloodthirsty. Now we are using the Maelstrom perfected lightning stuff. You don't have to have perfected. You can have the regular one from normal Maelstrom Arena if you want. The difference is minimal. In fact, the difference is only the first bonus, the spell penetration bonus, which is only going to help us on the back bar. The actual bonus itself increases all light and heavy attack damage you do while inside Wall of Elements. Yes, that stacks with Empower. So keep your wall down, make sure your lights and heavies are done inside that wall. If you don't have perfected, like I said, you'll lose the pen bonus, but that only applies on the back bar. It doesn't carry over, but the light and heavy attack bonus does. We've already considered our penetration for buffs and bonuses anyway, so that is actually overkill. You really don't need the perfected version. If you're using lightning, you want an infused shock glyph. If you're using flame, you want an infused flame glyph. But you want a weapon and spell damage glyph on precise on your front bar. That covers our front bar rotation, and the whole time we have this shock glyph constantly running. So if we had the weapon and spell damage on the back, yes, of course, it would be quite nice. But since we're not using an infused weapon on the front, we're taking advantage of as much crit as possible, the damage glyph doesn't fire as often. So we would get less damage output from it. So we've made it so that we have increased spell damage and weapon damage on the front during the front bar important stuff, and this glyph is more consistent. That did actually outperform the other way around, so that is why we've chosen that. The other set we're using, of course, is Jeff, more of the Inferno. This is absolutely nuts. Everybody loves Jeff the Daedroth. If you do a light attack, you have a 33% chance, or a heavy attack in fact, to spawn a Daedroth, and he breathes fire in people's faces and punches them in the back of the head. Absolutely amazing, lasts 15 seconds, and he has 0 cooldown once it is gone. You can apply it, he runs out, you just instantly reapply again. Also, it has magic on it. So you want a heavy and medium, in any order, for the helmet and shoulders, if you can. Failing that, you can, of course, go with Groftar if you prefer. That's actually a very good choice, especially for the AoE damage, because the breath from this actually does count as AoE, so our lightning stuff does enhance it. And from Groftar, the circular AoE fire effect also counts, again, as AoE, and that's what the lightning staff is for. So either way, the choice is yours. The body set, before we get to the options, is still Holofang. Now, I have seen an abundance of stupidity with this set where people claim that it cannot be used on the DPS. Well, it's been used on the DPS for this build for the last 3 patches, and it still works very, very well for multiple reasons. 1, it has 2 crit bonuses, which is absolutely brilliant considering we do lots of crit damage. We want the crit chance to be able to utilize that. We have Max Magicka, which increases our overall damage output, and whenever you critically, listen to this very, very carefully, whenever you critically heal or critically damage a target. So if you heal or if you damage, well, we're going to heal off of our abilities anyway, and we're going to damage because we're a DPS. Either side of this set, for its proc conditions, are pretty much guaranteed to work for us on cooldown every single time without fail. It's a set that can be utilized for healing or damaging or both. Now, when it applies, After 2 seconds, a ball will explode in front of you, a red kind of hemoglobin ball. And that will give you and your group, anyone standing inside of this, 2, 5, 2, 3 Magicka back. Used to be just over 3k. In fact, it used to be exactly 3k. Now it's not. But 2.5k back is insane. It will also apply minor vitality to you and your group within 6 meters. So it's quite a decent sized circle, increasing all of their healing received by 8%, which is a pretty substantial minor buff. Now, the minor buffs do not stack, because you can't put minor mending, or minor vitality rather, on top of minor vitality. So it will just refresh it if there are 2 of these in the room. So if someone fires this after you, it doesn't give them 2 versions of the buff, it just restarts it. However, the 2.5k Magicka restored does stack. So if you have 2 people using this, that's 5k Magicka back. If you have 3 people using this, that's 7.5k Magicka back. You see where this is going. These recovery bonuses, or this returned Magicka, stacks and stacks and stacks. And the cooldown is 9 seconds. So once every 9 seconds, you get 2.5 Magicka back for you and your group. That is effectively, based on the fact that recovery is every 2 seconds. Over time, this calculates to 560 recovery per person. So that's over 1k per person if you have 2 people in your group at the same time. So if your healer is already using this, sure, you can swap to another set if you want to. But if you put them together, people near you are never going to run out of Magicka. Especially if you're using an easy sort beside you, because then that can spam mines all day long. Anyway, too much explanation for that set. It's very, very simple. It's in black and white. You can see it there. That's what it does. Now, options. If you choose to, this is what I would preference for you. You can, of course, swap out Overwhelming and put it on the body. And if you do so, you'll have a higher uptime on it, because while you're on the back bar, you won't have any kind of major downtime. And while it's on your body, replace your front bar with Sororia Lightning. Now, as far as that's concerned, pieces-wise, you can put Sororia on the jewelry. But if that's a pain in the ass to farm, you can just keep Overwhelming on the jewelry and say 3 Sororia pieces. And then have 2 Overwhelming pieces and a Sororia staff. That way you've still got 5 and 5. The reason you want Sororia on the front bar staff is because the buff carries over. If you're not familiar with Sororia, it will increase your damage you do in dungeons, trials, and arenas by 5%. It'll give you more spell damage. It'll give you 2 max magic bonuses if you have the perfected version. If you don't, it's just 1 max magic bonus. And when you deal direct damage, you have a circle under your feet, and after 10 stacks, basically, of continuously doing damage, you will increase your overall spell damage by 520. So it's 10 stacks of 52 spell damage. If you step out of it for too long and it fades off, you lose all your stacks and you have to start all over again. But this used to be 20 stacks of 600 in total. Now it's 10 stacks of 520 in total. The overall output is slightly less, but the burst potential, or the build-up, is much, much faster. So this set was reduced in peak output, but buffed in its ability to get there faster. So it's a much, much more easier to use set now in content, because you don't have to stand on one spot for too long before you get the most out of the overall bonus. Again, these are choices. You don't have to change a damn thing. If you want to stick to Holofang and Overwhelming, you'll do just fine. As far as damage output is concerned, you can hit around 81, 82, sometimes 83 if you're really lucky with the Sororia setup. Failing that, with the Overwhelming and Holofang setup, you can, of course, still hit around 75 to 77 if we're talking this big, juicy dummy over here, which, by the way, is rigged to hell because he has so many things missing and so many situational things added. So that's never a full gauge, but since we're gauging that, that's what you can consider as a kind of goalpost, if you like. Now, champion points. So, first of all, we have 72 points into Ironclad to reduce the amount of direct damage we take. 64 and 64, and then 51 here. So flat damage for physical and magic, and then damage over time. Just bear in mind, of course, if you break free, your next stamina ability is cheaper. Use a Beast Trap, it's 80% cheaper after you've just broken free. 19 points in quick recovery to give us increased healing received. And of course, we have the Field Physician passive. We can res people very, very fast, and for doing so, we will take less damage during that time. 44 in Warlord to reduce the cost of break free. 75 into Tenacity to increase the amount we get back from a heavy attack. Bear in mind, if something's off balance, you should be heavy attacking it if you're low on resources, because you will get double back. This also contributes to that. 75 into Arcanus as well for mag recovery. 72 for dodge roll reduction, and 4 points in here just because we've got nowhere else to really put them, so we can take advantage of the treasure hunter passive. While you're farming for loot, you can have a heightened chance to get higher quality gear. 56 into Elfborn, 64 into Elemental Expert, and 6 into Spell Erosion. If you have all the bells and whistles in your group, you can put this down to 0 and replace these points here, if you like, and put them into Staff Expert, but flat out, we're just fine as we are. So this will increase your penetration, your flat damage output for all of your Magicka abilities, whether it be Shock, Flame, Frost, or Magic, and of course, we've got increased crit damage. 66 into Master Arms, since we're doing a lot of direct damage, especially our light attacks and our jabs, because they are direct, regardless of them being AoE. And we do want 75 points into Thaumaturge. We'll take the 23% increase of damage over time, because we do have quite a bit of it, but we've gone over the percentage point just a little bit, so we can unlock the Exploiter passive. We are the ones supplying Off Balance on purpose. That is the way the build is designed. So of course we're going to take advantage of the Exploiter, where we do more damage once something goes off balance. Now the rotation, this is very simple. You need to have your resistance buff up if you choose to use it. Remember, that's a choice. If you do, happy days, high recovery, nice resists. Then you want your Beast Trap on the ground. That needs to be down. Back bar, Blazing Spear, light attack, solar barrage, light attack, wall of elements, swap bars. Nice and simple. So spear, light barrage, light wall, swap. Now, while this is running, you want to do light, power of the light, so light attack, power of the light. Well, purifying light, in fact. Sorry, wrong morph. As soon as that's fired, light, puncture and sweeps, 3 times. Then, light attack, beast trap, swap. And you guessed it, we're back to the beginning again. Light blazing spear, light barrage, light wall swap, light purifying light, light jab 1, light jab 2, light jab 3, light trap, swap. Now, if your ultimate is ready, on the back bar, you do this. You fire it just before the wall goes down, so here, then light wall swap. If you're using your resistance buff, it's very simple. You alter your rotation very slightly. The back bar instead will be light attack, blazing spear, light attack, resistance buff, light solar barrage, light wall swap. So to recap and show you what it physically looks like: beast trap, light spear, light barrage, light wall swap, light light jabs, light jabs, light jabs, light beast swap. Simple as that. And just to show you what it looks like on a dummy: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Piece of piss. You never have to change it, ever. The only time you have to change it is to put in your ultimate, or if you're using a resistance buff. That's it. Just squeeze that in as and when you can. Rinse, repeat over and over and over and over and over and over. There's no change in lines. There's none of this really confusing stuff based only versus the dummy. And then in content, the targets have got different health percentages, so it's very, very different. That's it. Now, what do you do at execute? If the ads are down to 40% or the boss is down to around 30, that's when you just replace your entire rotation with spear, light wall, swap. Then all you do is light with 3 Jesus beams, beast trap, swap. Spear, wall, 3 Jesus beams, trap, swap. Rinse, repeat. So your basic rotation never changes until you get to execute, and then at execute your rotation gets even easier. 2 skills, swap, 3 beams, trap. 2 skills, swap, 3 beams, trap. Nothing complicated about that at all. Yes, your light attack and your channel timing needs to be practiced, because otherwise it can end up looking like this. That's wrong. You don't want that to happen, because you can see the full animation. You want this to happen. We'll fire the light from underneath the skill. It'll take a bit of practice. Now, we really don't need to see the dummy, do we? It's such a ball ache. It's boring. The video is really long. And people still want to see me hit that dummy. Why would you want to do that? You've seen the screenshot already. Okay, let's do it. No, I'm joking. We're not going to do that. You've seen enough. Now, fashion stuff. Let's go. So, we are using... This is very cool, actually. We're using the Sacy hat. This is a light Sacy. That's why it looks like Raiden, which is why he's so awesome. Be jealous. The chest is Assassin's League heavy. The shoulders are Scalecaller light. The hands are Dragon Guard light. The belt is Dramathra medium, I believe. Yes, it is. I was lucky. Nearly got that wrong. Thieves Guild heavy on the pants. That's been asked a lot, by the way. That's also on Toxicity. They're very cool. Kind of camo. Cargo pants, even. The feet are Silken Ring shoes, so that's light as well. That is an Abnathan staff on the front bar. And a Telvanni staff on the back bar. Now, the colors we're actually using Frozen Blood as the red. So you can see the red here on the head, chest, and the belt, and also on the staff a little bit. It's where it looks all kind of silvery, and some of them look a bit red. It's kind of a two-tone, so we're using that for the most part. Now, the black we're using is actually Legate Black again, but we are getting a new black with the next update. So if you don't have this, don't worry. It's going to be a really, really dark one. We're using that for the darker colors, but on the lighter gray, we're actually using this one here. We're actually using Obsidian Black. You could use that throughout instead if you prefer. But if you check the website, there's a screenshot there showing all the individual pieces, so you can actually lay this out exactly the same. The skin is, of course, the Meridian skin from Depths of Malatai. You just have to complete that on Vet, and that is yours. So, hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. Yes, everything was done on purpose. Surprise. Hopefully you didn't skip any, and that makes sense. So first of all, thank you all very much for watching. I hugely appreciate your support. If you are not subscribed on YouTube, please do hit that button. It is free. Also, if you'd like support outside the channel, there are some links in the info section for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com, where all the written guides are, including this one. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.